The UN is warning that hunger in Somalia is rapidly worsening, with 6.5 million people facing acute food insecurity. The figure is almost double the number this time last year, and the BBC's Caleb Mojes reports.
The crisis is driven by a prolonged drought, ongoing conflict, and soaring food prices, which have destroyed crops and livestock, severely affecting farmers and herders. Insecurity is also disrupting trade and limiting humanitarian aid access. UNICEF reports that 1.8 million children under 5 are at risk of acute malnutrition, with nearly 500,000 facing the most severe form. The UN is calling on donors to urgently increase funding to prevent the situation from worsening further.
In South Africa, the Madlanga Commission has ordered that the crime intelligence officer who could not present himself before the inquiry due to ill health must testify on the 11th of March. The intelligence officer who handles informants was meant to begin his testimony yesterday. However, proceedings stood down after the commission ruled that his legal counsel must produce a more appropriate and descriptive medical note. The commission is probing allegations of criminality, corruption and political interference in the police and criminal justice system of the country. Commission Chairperson retired Justice Buyiseni Madlanga has ordered that the witness must file a statement by next Tuesday.
Madlanga, the hearing of the witness's testimony is postponed to 11 March 2026, and the statement of the witness must be filed by 3 March 2026. That's the order.
A federal judge has ruled that the Trump administration had adopted an unlawful policy that allows for the rapid deportation of migrants to countries other than their own without providing them a chance to object and raise concerns for their safety. U.S. District Judge Brian Murphy in Boston issued a final ruling declaring the U.S. Department of Homeland Security's policy invalid in a case that the administration expects will ultimately be decided by the U.S. Supreme Court. The Department of Justice lawyers had argued that the policy satisfied immigration law requirements and due process standards and was essential for deporting migrants whose home countries refused them due to crimes they committed. A third round of talks between the U.S. and Iran over Tehran's nuclear program will be held in Geneva today. The U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has described Iran's unwillingness to discuss its ballistic missile program as a big problem. The BBC's Lise Douchet reports.
Today's talks could be decisive in determining whether or not a deal can be done. Iran is offering compromises on its nuclear program, including the dilution of its highly enriched uranium, to convince Washington it's not developing a nuclear weapon. In exchange, it wants crippling economic sanctions to be lifted, and it insists on its right to enrich uranium.
That's all for now. For any stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I am Chanduko Ligege.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, Côte d'Ivoire will play 2 international friendlies in preparations for the 2026 WAFCON. And top seed Felix Auger-Aliassime has convincingly won his Dubai Tennis Championship match. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
This is Africa Update, your pulse to the continent. Stories shaping nations and voices driving change. Stay informed, stay connected, right here on Channel Africa, the African Perspective.
It is midday and this is Africa Update, coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa on Channel Africa from an African perspective. We are on DSTV's audio bouquet channel 802, an OpenView channel 628, and on www.channelafrica.co.za, as well as on the SABC Plus app and Channel Africa app, available on the Apple and Google Play stores. Join us in conversation on our social media platforms. That's on X, Instagram, and subscribe on YouTube at Channel Africa 1. On Facebook at Channel Africa, you can also send us your comments and voice notes on +267 83 288 6684 #Africa Update. Coming up in this hour, 2 Ugandan women have been arrested for kissing in public, and the condition of early childhood development centres in South Africa come under the spotlight. On #Africa Update, ask Ukraine's Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha says more than 1,700 Africans from 36 countries are currently fighting for Russia in the war in Ukraine, accusing Moscow of using deception to recruit them. Now, do you know if there are citizens from your country who are reportedly fighting for Russia in Ukraine? Share your thoughts and your views on all our social media platforms. That's on X, Instagram at Channel Africa 1, on Facebook at Channel Africa. You can also send us your comments and voice notes on +267 83 288 6684 #Africa Update Us.
Africa Update with Lulu Gaboo, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time.
Now, we're focusing on in other news as we open the show. Now, Ukraine's Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha says more than 1,700 Africans from 36 countries are currently fighting for Russia in the war in Ukraine, accusing Moscow of using deception to recruit them. Speaking alongside his Ghanaian counterpart, Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa, Sybiha said Ukraine is working with African governments to prevent citizens from being lured into what he described as a deadly war. He claims that many recruits are being misled with false job offers, and Russia has denied illegally recruiting African citizens. However, reports have increased in recent months of African men being promised civilian jobs in Russia only to be sent to the front lines in Ukraine. Ablakwa says many of those fighting lacked military or security background and were recruited through deceptive schemes, including via the dark web. He expressed solidarity with Ukraine, called for a ceasefire, and said he would request that Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky release 2 Ghanaian prisoners of war captured while fighting for Russia. Ghana, which will chair the African Union next year, plans to promote public awareness campaigns targeting trafficking networks accused of recruiting Africans for Russian forces. This is just one of the big stories that we are focusing on that's happening across the globe. And that's our question for today on #Africa Update. Ask Ukraine's Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha saying more than 1,700 Africans from 36 countries are currently fighting for Russia in the war in Ukraine, accusing Moscow of using deception to recruit them. Now, we want to know, do you know if there are citizens from your country who are reportedly fighting for Russia in Ukraine? Share your thoughts and your views on all our social media platforms. That's on X, Instagram at Channel Africa 1, on Facebook at Channel Africa. You can also send us your comments and voice notes on +267 83 288 6684 #Africa Update Us.
África. Conhece o Ntivani?
Claro que sou eu.
Ntivani é o amante da música de corpo e alma.
Eu amo música africana.
Ele aprecia todos os tipos de melodias e passa os seus dias a ouvir a Channel Africa. Adivinha só, a Channel Africa quer ajudar o Ntivani e os amantes da música em todo o lado a descobrir ainda mais música incrível. Por isso, a Channel Africa está a convocar artistas africanos a submeterem as suas músicas. Músicos, lembrem-se de nos dar todas as informações relevantes no music@channelafrica.co.za. As submissões são a vossa oportunidade de ser ouvidos, mas não garantem inclusão na lista. Todas as submissões serão cuidadosamente analisadas para verificar se cumprem os requisitos da nossa estação. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
Africa Update with Lulu Gaboo on Channel Africa.
It is 10 after 12 Central African time, and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa. Our Kenya's President William Ruto recently announced that 2 Kenyan land borders with Somalia would be reopened in April, almost 15 years after they were closed because of attacks by militant group Al-Shabaab. Ruto said the intention to reopen 2 crossings follows years of security assessments, adding that there will be a heavy deployment of security forces to ensure the move does not compromise safety. The border was closed in October 2011 when the East African nation launched a major military incursion into Somalia to push back Al-Shabaab, an Al-Qaeda affiliate from its border. And to discuss this further, we have on the line Fergus Kell, a research fellow with the Africa program at Chatham House. Fergus, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Now, Fergus, did the blockade have any impact? Did the attack stop?
Well, as you said, I mean, this has been a long-term blockade. The border's been closed since 2011, and there have been major attacks over the years since then. The most damaging, particularly Westgate Mall in Nairobi in 2013, and Garissa University, so just across the border between Kenya and Somalia in 2015, but also, with slightly fewer casualties, but at a lower level, attacks have continued over the years since. In 2020, there was an attack on a US military base in Kenya by Al-Shabaab. There was also a previous plan by Kenya to open the border again in 2023, but some continued cross-border raid-style attacks by Al-Shabaab led to the postponement of those arrangements. So just last year, for example, there were 6 Kenyan police reservists that were killed in a cross-border raid by Al-Shabaab. So attacks have continued, and I think it's important to recognize we're talking here about an extremely porous border, even despite the official closures. So there's still informal routes that leave things open for unrecorded trade flows, for smuggling of goods and trafficking in persons, as well as refugee flows. So it's a little more complicated than the official border closure would suggest.
Now, could the announcement by President Ruto signal that the security situation has improved in Somalia? Because just going back to 2023, a plan to reopen the border had been announced, but further attacks postponed the arrangement. So what are they facing now?
Well, I think, even just last month, 2 Kenyan police reservists were killed at a border patrol point about 100 meters inside of Kenya in Garissa County. And I think, it's difficult to read into this, looking at the situation in Somalia as a significant signal that security situation has really improved. I think the Somali government is facing significant structural weaknesses, increased tensions between the federal government and the member states, and quite an uncertain path looking ahead at the roadmap towards scheduled elections for this year, but also in terms of the future of the Somali National Army and security forces there. So from my perspective, I think this is less reflective of the security situation in Somalia improving, and more about domestic political realities in Kenya. So, we've seen last year that President Ruto signed a decree to end the extra vetting needed for Kenyan Somalis to get national ID cards. The Kenyan Somali community is an important political constituency in Kenya, and in announcing this move, I think Ruto was quite clear in talking about the importance of Kenyan Somalis being able to cross the border to visit relatives and so on. So there's also a political angle to this domestically, not just about the security realities in Somalia.
And the challenges that were faced by both countries with this closure, you touched on just trade happening, but also just the negative side of things was also quite impactful. But speak about challenges that affected just the citizens who were then stuck without being able to gain access.
Exactly. So it's important to recognize that there are really significant and historical long-term cross-border links between the two countries. So ethnic Somalis within Kenya make up at least 3 million of the Kenyan population, so a significant proportion of Kenya's population, and that obviously comes with cross-border links in terms of in terms of family, in terms of economic links, in terms of trade. There's also, as the economic situation in Somalia has been very difficult, there is a sense of people looking to its neighbor, more affluent neighbor in Kenya in terms of economic opportunities, job opportunities, opportunities to get trade in goods into the country. And we've seen things like Somalia joining the East African Community in 2023. That was partly at the initiative of Kenya, and a reflection of Kenya kind of trying to formalize some more economic aspects of the partnership. A sense that the kind of closure of the border and the driving informality in terms of trade and movement of people has also cost the Kenyan government revenue in terms of pushing those movements towards more kind of criminal elements and away from formalized trade and revenues there.
What needs to be done to ensure that the reopening restores trade while preserving public safety?
Well, I think it's a challenge, as you mentioned in the intro there. President Ruto has talked about the need for heavy deployment of security forces. That requirement certainly hasn't changed, but I think it also now needs to make sure that there is also a capacity in terms of processing citizens who are visiting relatives, in terms of making sure that there are the proper procedures in place in terms of formalizing trade and the right checks and balances there. But I think also really significant is that there needs to be dialogue with Kenya's security partners, and it seems that this announcement came as a surprise to many security officials, both within Kenya, but also in terms of its international partners, especially the US, which is heavily engaged in counterterrorism cooperation with Kenya. So there needs to be, leading up to this April reopening, if this does go ahead as planned, there needs to be more dialogue and support on both sides. And in the kind of longer term, this needs to fit within a genuine commitment to regional integration through the EAC, which Somalia joined partly at the initiative of Kenya in 2023, like I said.
Well, Fergus, thank you so much for joining us. We'll leave it there for today.
Thank you.
It's Fergus Cowell, a research fellow with the Africa program at Chatham House, joining us on the line. It is 18 after 12 Central African time, and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa. And just looking at other news making headlines across the globe, militants linked to Al-Qaeda and Islamic State are rapidly escalating attacks in the Niger-Benin-Nigeria border region. This is according to the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project. Violent incidents in the tri-border area rose 90% between 2024 and 2025, with deaths more than doubling to over 1,000. Fighters aligned with Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam, while Muslimin and Islamic State in the Sahel province have expanded operations across northern Benin, western Niger and northwest Nigeria. Al-Saled said growing rivalry between factions and weak regional coordination are likely to fuel further escalation in an area long vulnerable due to porous borders and limited state control. And these are just one of the stories that are making headlines across the globe. It is 19 after 12 Central African time, and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa.
Africa at Play with Neto and ETO Chemane.
Lelita, talk to us about your relationship with your father, Coach Pitso. What is this one thing that he said to you that is still stuck at the top of your head?
Coach Pitso and our mom, Moira Kakale, have always told us that whatever we do in life, we must do it to the best of our abilities and represent our family well. But the big thing is do what you love and do it with all the passion that you have. And I think we see it in both their work. I mean, my mom has done a really good job with placing Coach Pitso in different clubs around the world, and she's negotiated contracts, and she's showing that as a woman you can also do work that is seen, and you can also get respect from men in a male-dominated space. And I think my dad has also shown that you must never underestimate the Black African man.
Lelintle Musimane, a South African communications and digital media professional. Lelintle is also a daughter to a great mentor when it comes to the game of football, Coach Jingles Musimane.
Live every Saturday and Sunday from 2 to 5 p.m. Your window to the continent and beyond. Africa Update. Only on Channel Africa. Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Two Ugandan women have been arrested for kissing in public. Uganda's 2023 Anti-Homosexuality Act imposes penalties of up to life imprisonment for consensual same-sex relations. Now, the law has triggered outrage among rights campaigners and condemnation from the United Nations and Western countries. And for more on this, we are joined on the line by a political and social analyst, Monday Akol Amazima. Monday, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Good afternoon to you. The pleasure is mine, yes, and I'm happy to join you.
Now, how does this law fit into Uganda's broader political strategy or governance style?
Well, this law, of course, when you look at Uganda, Rwanda, and Tanzania, they've had serious laws against homosexuality, against same-sex kind of relationship. Secondly, Uganda is the seat of the Pan-African, global Pan-African movement, and therefore, when you look at most of our societies here in Uganda, they actually exercise close to zero tolerance to same-sex kind of relationship. Therefore, Uganda, many Ugandans are really not in agreement with that kind of practice, though, of course, people who are practicing it are doing it secretively.
Now, we want to know exactly how these women were arrested. Where exactly were they? And just the process that unfolded after they were found kissing.
Yeah, in Uganda, same-sex kind of relationship, one is considered a public nuisance. So definitely, by the time they found them doing that in public, of course, there was public outrage, and the arrest was actually to save them from the mob that wanted to lynch them. So it was a preventive arrest in terms of so that they don't face mob justice. In Uganda, like most African countries, something to do with sexuality is somebody's private life. For example, even a man kissing a woman in public is also not seen in good faith, because they believe things to do with intimacy are supposed to be done privately and in a private place.
And what are the potential long-term social consequences of criminalizing consensual same-sex relationships?
The long-term effects is that one, of course, Uganda is continuously going to be alienated from the international circles, that is the Western world. But what I also want to say is that in Uganda, anything to do with kissing in public is something that is seen as alien. We remember there was a time when Princess Bagaya actually kissed the speaker then of Parliament, Wapakabulo, in public, and people looked at it as in bad faith, because we believe that in Africa, if you're to kiss somebody or even go an extra hand over hugging, it has to be your partner. That is the culture that cuts across most African countries, most African societies. But when it comes to the issue of intimacy, strictly people think it's something that has to be done in the bedroom, in the private place. For example, we have the anti-pornographic laws, and in the anti-pornographic laws also show that even mere spreading photos of people sleeping together, maybe having sex, people dressed indecently. In Uganda, it's punishable. Recently, even Uganda Communication Commission banned actually musicians who go on stage when they are indecently dressed. So there has been an effort of trying to crack down on immorality, and these things have come in. Newspapers have been talked to, even media houses, broadcast media houses, televisions that show photos and videos that are not supposed to be seen by the young people are also being cautioned. Now people kissing in public or showing affection seriously in public when they are not related, same-sex kind of relationships. So those are some of the things that the country is looking at in trying to impact morals in the young people.
You touched on Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania, with the fact that there are similar laws in those countries. Now, how does Uganda's position compare with other African countries apart from Rwanda and Tanzania?
Yeah, of course, in Kenya, they have taken a liberal stand. In Kenya, the government has taken a liberal stand. But even when it has taken a liberal stand, the Kenyans themselves as people, they would also not stand it that because there was an incident in Nakuru where actually a lady was stoned for also kissing another lady. There was also a situation that happened in Mombasa where a man was actually portraying himself as a woman. So I think in terms of same-sex and homosexuality in East Africa, the reception is still low towards those people who really go in for same-sex marriage, who go in for same-sex relationships. Now, when you look at countries like Somalia, of course, that is purely an Islamic country. They would actually even stone you to death or kill you on the spot the moment you identified as somebody who is indulging in same-sex kind of relationship. So ideally in Africa, it is still hostile. Most African countries, the situation is still hostile for gay. But what is clear is that most of the people who are into that do it in secret. There are even some guest houses, hotels, where they even don't allow people of the same sex to share a room. So that is how bad it has gone.
Now, what options do local activists and civil society groups have under such restrictive laws?
The local activists have to educate people that in the first place, same-sex relationships are a choice like any other person makes with a relationship with a person of a different sex. But also, they also have to sensitize their own members that things to do with sexuality is not something that you have to put in the public. It is something that this is your private life that has to be in your bedroom, in your house, in your comfort area. But things like kissing in public, even when people are married, in Africa, it is in most African cultures, they look at it as awkward that when you show so much intimacy, romance in public. So the activists have to sensitize their members that the ground on which they're operating is still delicate, and therefore they have to be very cautious. Secondly, they also have to sensitize the public not to be hostile to people who are engaged in same-sex relationship. They understand them. They should try to understand them, just like you'll understand your daughter or son getting married to a person of a different religion, of a different culture.
Now, just in wrapping up very quickly in 15 seconds, Monday, what does this case tell us about the intersection of politics, culture and human rights today?
Yeah, in Uganda, I just want to say that currently, once you are identified as a homosexual, however much political support you have, people will shun you. People will not vote for you. They think you're bringing in something that is diluting their culture. The same thing in Kenya, the same thing in Tanzania, the same thing in Rwanda. So the currently, even actually by mere knowing that you've been sponsored by the gay, that can also affect your support. So ideally, in terms of politics, the people who are gay are also still being discriminated. They need to work harder to sensitize people for them to be accepted in society.
Well, Monday, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us on Africa Update. That was political and social analyst Monday Akol Amazima joining us on the line. It is 12:30 Central African time, and our news headlines up next.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Lulu. Good afternoon. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha says more than 1,700 Africans are fighting for Russia in its war in Ukraine, adding that Moscow is using deception to trick them into fighting. Militants linked to an Al-Qaeda and Islamic State are rapidly increasing their attacks on the borderlands between Niger, Benin and Nigeria. And the UN is warning that hunger in Somalia is rapidly worsening, with 6.5 million people facing acute food insecurity. I'll be back with a full bulletin at 1 p.m. Central African time.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective. Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
In this hour, in our sports update, we begin with football news. Cote d'Ivoire will play 2 international friendlies against Benin and Kenya as part of the final preparations for the 2026 Total Energies CAF Women's Africa Cup of Nations, WAFCON, which is scheduled to take place in Morocco from the 17th of March to the 3rd of April. The Ivorian women's national team started training camp in Abidjan on Tuesday before facing Benin on the 28th of February and Kenya on the 4th of March. The two games are expected to provide head coach Reynald Pedros and his technical staff with a crucial opportunity to assess squad fitness, test tactical combinations, and finalize selection decisions ahead of the continental tournament. Cote d'Ivoire returned to WAFCON after an extended absence, having last featured in 2014 when they secured a third-place finish, their best result in the competition. Malawi women's national coach Lovemore Fazili says his side will take the lessons from the COSAFA Women's Championship into the preparations for next month's WAFCON in Morocco. The She Flames bowed out of COSAFA despite a 1-0 win over Angola in their final group match, finishing second with 6 points, but missing out on the best runners-up spot to Zimbabwe. Fazili admitted disappointment at not reaching the semi-finals, but stressed the team will not take a break. Instead, continuing preparations with the aim of building on recent progress at continental level. As Stadium Management, South Africa and Kaizer Chiefs aim to amplify the message to arrive early for the Soweto Derby on Saturday and promote the new ticketing system, football fans are expressing their concerns. Their My Ticket system has now been used in 3 matches since last month at this iconic 2010 World Cup final venue, and it's encountered what the authorities call teething problems. The new system was introduced to curb the use of the fake tickets, but football fans say that it's seriously concerning.
Hi, my name is Vusi, and we always used the other ticketing system, but then since they changed, you have to scan from the gate and then scan again to enter the stadium. So you have to do 2 scans before you enter the gate. So the main problem arises from when you enter the first gate, because that's where fans from all the ticketing or all the parking areas, maybe they come from L, entrance L, and then everyone has to come in and then scan there.
For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fide Lungwadi.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Stella Longwe pamalonje
ndiyetu apa tindikatswiri oyimba wa dziko la Mozambique amene ali Ricabana. Ndatiuzeni kuti mayimba chamba chanji komanso dzina lanu lenileni koleka ngati dzina limeneli ndilijatu atapa stage. Dzina lanu kwenikweni ndi ndani komanso mayimba chamba chanji?
Ineyo dzina langa lenileni ndine Ricardo Musa Rabana. Chamba chimene ndimayimba ine ndi manganji, ndimakonda kwambiri ma tradition. Zimenezo ndi nyimbo zathu chifukwa kwathu kunoko tili ndi madansi osiyana-siyana a chimizi. Ndi ineyo poti ndi mnyamata wa chimizi, ndi ndimakondanso nyimbo za chimizi.
Ndinu a chimizi? Ndi makondanso nyimbo za chimizi, mapangaso za chimizi. Ayi zosangalatsa kuti mwanena bwera kuti ndinu a chimizi. Anthu amazibisa, anthu amafuna kukhala ndithu achitauni. Koma chikhalidwe chilibe chitauni, alisa ndi chikhalidwe chake, alisa ndi zimene amakonda.
malonje pa nthawi ya 6 koloko kufikira 7 koloko madzulo. Lowiruka ndi Stella Longwe.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Good afternoon, I'm Nosipo Zuma. In your business news, the Sawa Angola State Oil Company, Sonangol, says it is taking to Chinese financial institutions to secure a $4.8 billion loan to partly finance the construction of a new refinery in the Atlantic seaport of Lobito. The financing, if completed, will mark the first borrowing by the Southern African oil producer from China since 2017, when it opted to reduce its exposure to resource-backed loans. Sonangol's CEO Sebastião Gaspar Martins says the company says it is engaging with financial institutions in China to secure funding for one phase of the $6.2 billion required. China's lithium price surged today after Zimbabwe suspended all raw minerals exports, stoking fears of supply disruptions at a time when rising energy storage demand has already been driving a rally in the market. The most traded lithium carbonate contract on the Guangzhou Futures Exchange climbed 6.07% to $26,436 a ton after earlier sparking more than 9%. Harare announced yesterday an immediate halt to exports of raw minerals and lithium concentrates. South African Finance Minister Nokho says the government will prioritize resolving the SABC's financial and infrastructure crisis this year. He confirmed that his office will first settle the broadcaster's $62 million debt to Centec and prevent a post-office liquidation before upgrading SABC's failing infrastructure. The Department of Education earlier welcomed a $44 million allocation, a portion of which must go toward settling debts. Minister has reiterated government's commitment to making infrastructure investment the bedrock of the country's growing economy. Kodongwane acknowledged the dire state of the SABC's facilities.
What I'm doing at the moment is to attend to two issues which are urgent. One is avoid the liquidation of the post office. Secondly is to try to settle the Centec SABC debt with Centec. The next phase during the course of the year is to attend to the SABC infrastructure, which has to be attended. I made that point during the budget speech that we will attend to this matter during the course of the year.
Meanwhile, head of communications at South Africa's Department of Defence, Siphiwe Dlamini, says more funding is needed to ensure that all members of South African Defence Force are able to carry out their operations. This as Finance Minister Noko Dongwane has allocated an additional almost $170 million to the department's budget for the 2026-2027 financial year. Dlamini explains.
We are happy to receive the little that National Treasury has given us, and we are also happy to note the Treasury's efforts to provide additional funding. However, we still believe that more could have been done. Remember, we are the custodian of the territorial integrity of the Republic of South Africa, and therefore a lot of effort is going to go into that area. But without funding that we need, it's going to be very difficult.
And finally, Dubai Aerospace Enterprise, DAE, says it has agreed to acquire aircraft leasing firm Macquarie Air Finance at an enterprise value of about $7 billion. DAE says the deal will create a combined fleet of 1,029 owned, managed and committed aircraft serving 191 airline customers across 79 countries, with narrow-body jets making up roughly 70% of the portfolio. The acquisition will add 37 new airline customers to DAE's roster, including carriers in 7 countries where the Dubai state-owned lessor currently has no presence. Your financial indicators: $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 Naira 351, and Botswana is 13 Pula 03. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 07, and in Zambia it's 18 kwacha 81. The BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 ril 14. Russia is 76 rubles 73. India is 90 rupees 91. China is 6 yuan 87, and in South Africa $1 is trading at 15 rand 89. $1 is trading at 73 pence to the British pound and 84 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $5,179 and platinum at $2,286 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $70.99 a barrel. Now, for any stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nosipho Zuma.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Darubini ya Afrika na I am Henry Shakif.
Kiongozi wa chama kikuu cha upinzani nchini Tanzania Tundu Lissu anayekabiliwa na kesi ya uhaini anasema hajala chakula licha ya kesi inayomkabili awali kuahirishwa. Pengine haya malalamiko yana mashiko ya namna yoyote?
Kama yana mashiko ama hayana ni jambo tofauti, kwa sababu yeye muda uliotolewa mchana ni kwa ajili ya kwenda kula. Nakumbuka kwamba Lissu ni mahabusu, sio mfungwa. Japokuwa sijajua taratibu za magereza zinakuaje wanapofungwa na mahabusu, lakini mahabusu wanapelekwa chakula na ndugu zao kutoka nje.
Na kama tunavyofahamu, kesi hii ikiwa inaendelea, imeelezwa kwamba itakuwa inaendelea kusikilizwa mfululizo ili kuweza kuendelea na kuweza kuimaliza kwa haraka. Yeye mwenyewe ndio ambaye anajitetea, Tundu Lissu. Pengine wana namna ya wao kutaka kuleta hukumu ya haraka, au haya ni maelezo ya awali?
Hapana, ni kesi inaendelea na wanashikiliwa mashahidi. Kwa hiyo lazima itapelekwa haraka, kwa sababu pia limekuwa ni ombi la mshtakiwa mwenyewe anayejitetea, Tundu Lissu.
Darubini ya Afrika kila Jumatatu hadi Ijumaa kuanzia saa 11 kamili hadi saa 12 kamili jioni majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
Africa Update with Lulu Gaboo on Channel Africa.
It is 12:43 Central African time, and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa. Join us in conversation on our social media platforms. That's on X, Instagram, and subscribe on YouTube at Channel Africa 1. On Facebook at Channel Africa, you can also send us your comments and voice notes on +267 83 288 6684 #Africa Update. In this year's State of the Nation address, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa committed to ending child stunting by the year 2030, expanding early childhood development and making grade R compulsory. But the condition of spaces where young children learn are often overcrowded and unsafe. And today we explore why safe learning spaces are essential to giving children the start they deserve. And to do that, we are joined on the line by Warren Povey, head of partnerships at Breadline Africa. Warren, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Hi there, thanks for having me.
Now, Warren, you argue that we cannot build strong foundations without safe early learning spaces. Now, what are you seeing on the ground that prompted this call, and where do you believe the biggest gap lies?
Well, Breadline Africa has been around for a number of years now. I think we're in our 33rd year. So this isn't a new problem. It's not something that's just appeared. If you walk out into any informal settlement, into a rural area, you'll see that children are learning under trees, in shacks that are falling over, in dark spaces, really, and it's just plain unsafe.
And how do overcrowded classes and unsafe facilities affect children on a daily basis? And also, being under a tree and learning, are you able to share an example of a centre that transformed after infrastructure improvements?
Yeah, so overcrowding, if we consider the data drive Thrive by 5 data that came out last year, I think it's close to 60% of children. I know they like to put it at 40% are on track, but 60% of children are not on track. And then if you look at the fine motor skills of these children, almost 70% are way behind where they should be. So if you're in a dark space, you're not going to be able to learn. If you're in an overcrowded space, how do you get the attention you deserve? I could name a handful of projects we did last year. I think we almost completed 40 centers last year alone. But one of my favorites was in Acorn Hook near Hoedspruit. We worked with the partner Timbavati Foundation, and we've transformed that center now from an unsafe cooking center we've built them a safe cooking facility. We've given them safe toilets, and later on in the year, we're looking to upgrade their classrooms to give the children space to learn as well as to develop their fine motor skills.
Now, Warren, you describe a cycle where centres can't register without infrastructure and cannot afford infrastructure without registration. How widespread is this problem?
So I can't give you the exact number, but I can tell you that it's the majority of centres are struggling to get to registration. We have to give credit where credit is due, and the Banapele Drive is great foundation to start the registration. So many centers are conditionally registered at bronze, but that doesn't entail them to a subsidy. That doesn't mean that the government grant is going to reach them. They need to upgrade their center to achieve silver status and then gold finally, where they will receive the 24 Rand a month per child, 24 Rand a day per child, if that child obviously qualifies under criteria. So the registration issue at the moment is, yes, we've got thousands registered at conditionally on bronze level, but now to get them to silver, they need infrastructure upgrades. And then to gold, they need to make sure that they have all the requirements in place. And that includes safe toilets, a cooking space, an office sick bay, as well as enough learning space per classroom, where we work at about 1.5 meters per child. And that's just to achieve the grant status and receive the subsidy. So if we could end the cycle, it would be great. But unfortunately, in order to get the grant, you need the infrastructure. And to get the infrastructure, you need the funding. So the cycle could continue for a while.
The Thrive by 5 index shows that only 42% of children are developmentally on track before grade 1. Now, you've just mentioned something that's very key, which was part of this question. And I just want to know, with regard to this, the 42%, is this the correct figure? Or is there some changing about of figures? And how do we get this right? Because seemingly, not even seemingly, this includes everyone.
Yeah, so listen, the numbers that came out were done by an organization that we believe in. So I don't believe that the numbers were tweaked in any way. There are scarier numbers because these are numbers done at centers that are running as ECDs. These don't include your household centers where the numbers drop to between 20 and 30% are only developmentally ready. So you mentioned as you've just said, 42% are ready. I focus on the 58% that aren't ready. That's the scary number, is that more than half of the children in this country aren't ready. And if you want to take it a step further, by grade 4, the literacy rate is 85% of children cannot read for meaning. So if that shows you that 42% doubles into the illiteracy rate in just a few years.
And how do we get it right? Starting point.
There's a famous saying when we look at this problem, it's how do we eat an elephant, So it's one bite at a time, and there are an amazing bunch of organizations out there in South Africa that are doing great work. I can name them, but I think the focus should be on developing this public and private partnership, working closer with government instead of being called in when needed to fix a problem. Let's develop the strategy together from the start. And that starts at district level, at municipality level, then at provincial. Nationally, they have a great plan with the Banapele, but we need to roll this down all the way through into the districts and the circuit managers, etc. So for us, yes, we work with great partners. Funding is a massive issue because infrastructure isn't cheap, but neither are the services that our partners offer. And I think that's where we get our lines blurred, is we believe, okay, well, they've got a brand new building, they're going to make it. Someone needs to run that, and that's where we come with our partners, and they need funding too.
When you say infrastructure isn't cheap, but why is infrastructure often seen as a secondary when you argue it is foundational?
Everyone will argue that their service is the most important. So we could argue that infrastructure is the most important, but without a roof over your head, a child's not going to go to school. A child won't be sent to an unsafe center. We see that right now around the corner from our office in Khayelitsha, is that a lady who is an entrepreneur who's been running a center for years, her center is falling apart. And from having almost 40 children 2 years ago, she's battling to even have 10 children come visit. So parents won't send their children to an unsafe center. So the children are staying at home. And the other aspect is this female entrepreneur is losing business. And how is she meant to feed herself and her family? So it is a bigger problem, but that in a nutshell should explain it. I wouldn't send my child to a building that's going to fall down.
Yeah, well, Warren, thank you so much for joining us. We are going to leave it there for today. That is Warren Povey, Head of Partnerships at Breadline Africa, joining us on the line.
Africa is changing, and the world is paying attention. This March, Channel Africa invites you to be part of a new conversation. Africa Matters, a platform where experts, policymakers, and thought leaders come together to unpack the big issues of our time: technology, politics, economics, climate change, and the future of our people. This is where ideas meet action, where change becomes opportunity, where Africa's voice takes its rightful place on the global stage. In March 2026, Channel Africa hosts Africa Climate Change Recovery Summit. Join the dialogue. Be part of the movement. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa Update with Lulu Gaboo, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time.
Well, it's a happy Thursday to Tebogo Kuleni of the Upside team. How are you today and what's coming up?
I'm fantastic, Lulu. Thank you so much. It's a fabulous Thursday this afternoon. We'll be exploring some fashion, a couple of trends there, street art, and then we'll be getting into conversation with our guest, Kanyisa M, who will be coming to studio to join us to talk about an upcoming national tour titled Firstborn Daughter Syndrome. A social reality where the eldest daughters are often expected to assume emotional, financial, and caregiving responsibility from a young age. We'll be unpacking the tour and some of the realities that the firstborns are dealing with in Africa. That's all coming up.
Yeah, that's something very interesting to tune into with Tebogo Kuleni and Matseko Musito on the Upside coming up from the top of the hour. As we continue on Africa Update, today on hashtag Africa Update Asks, Ukraine's Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha says more than 1,700 Africans from 36 countries are currently fighting for Russia in the war in Ukraine, accusing Moscow of using deception to recruit them. Now, we want to know, do you know if there are citizens from your country who are reportedly fighting for Russia in Ukraine? And we do have some of your comments and responses that have come through. Omex Jr. says, Ukrainian foreign minister is mad. This is totally a lie. And then Refile Mwase says, sad news to African countries. And Daniel Zimba not saying that not in Malawi, not here. And Victor Vic Kasawala Banda says, okay, I guess this is just, if you want to hear your comments and your, voice notes and your thoughts on what's happening here on any of our questions, hashtag Africa Update Ask. Do interact with us, and we will be reading your comments and your stories and voice notes on our platform that is on hashtag Africa Update and on Channel Africa. It is 12:56 Central African Time, and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa.
Keep Africa in your hands. Connect to our website for all your news, sports, and cultural updates. channelafrica.co.za.
Now, in the battle against gender-based violence, a boxing tournament dubbed Battle for Love will be held in Pretoria, South Africa on Saturday, the 28th of February, to raise awareness against the crisis. Now, the tournament will feature 7 bouts headlined by the match-up between Simangele Hadebe and Sibulele Soboisi from the World Boxing Organization's African flyweight title. Vincent Sitsula has more.
Simangele Smash Hadebe will step into the ring on Saturday, wearing more than gloves and carrying a lot more than just determination. She hopes to tell a story of resilience as she prepares to defend a WBO African flyweight title in a high-stakes bout that forms part of the anti-gender-based violence boxing tournament. Hadebe is a victim of GBV herself, and fighting in the tournament means a lot to her.
Actually, a fight against gender-based violence, against child abuse. I was a victim myself at a very young age, sexually molested, and it's more like a big thing for me, a big deal for me, and I'm grateful for the opportunity for Fighters Club Promotion for putting me on the bill and actually to be representing that and also to speak out.
Hadebe is set to face the inexperienced Sibulele Soboisi from the Western Cape, who has just 4 professional fights to her name. A win for her will boost the rankings to challenge for more significant belts overseas. Last year, she lost a World Boxing Council silverweight flyweight title fight against Gabriela Sanchez in Mexico, and she knows what to expect from her opponent.
I know we're fighting a southpaw again. We actually challenged at the first the WBO that I'll be defending. I did fight a southpaw, and I'm fighting again a southpaw. So for us, it's more like we're getting used to it. How to fight southpaw, and it's not like we haven't been sparring southpaw. We have been sparring southpaw, but I've been switching also on the opponent, to get the feed of things, just not to get used to the same opponent.
Female boxers have been struggling to get fights, which has impacted on their livelihoods. And Khadebe is no different. She was only in the ring twice last year. Promoter Terry Ann Head says it's vital to create platforms for these athletes to express themselves.
These fighters out there, some of them, like you said, haven't been fighting for years. And for us, it's vital that we create tournaments so that these fighters can get exposure. At the end of the day, South Africa has got the best talent. I firmly believe, look at Smash and what's coming up and see that these fighters, the more airtime they get, the better the playtime.
On the undercard, Jared Silverman will battle Simpiwe Ntombela in the junior middleweight division, while Leanne Jansen van Vieren will trade leather with Libra Mtarini in the women's flyweight division. Vincent Sitsuram, Johannesburg.
And that's how we wrap Africa Update today. It's been a great Thursday, and continue with us on all our social media platforms, and we will do this again tomorrow. Goodbye.
Keep Africa in your hands. Connect to our website for all your news, sports, and cultural updates. channelafrica.co.za.
A big thank you to Lulu Gaboo and team. Join them again tomorrow.